Despite their beautiful relationship, the couple knew it was unconventional. He had never been approved by his family, especially his mother, despite the love they shared. In his mother's mind, he would have been a different kind of daughter-in-law because he was their only son. There were no boxes checked by her. In spite of their family's disapproval, he was steadfastly in love with her, and the two decided to get married. However, they were unaware of the difficulties they would face. It had only been a few weeks since Clara and Mark had been married when they found themselves moving into Mark's childhood home in Orange Grove, New York. Clara's mother, 65-year-old Maria, had always been cold to Mark, and the idea of living under her roof did not appeal to her. Unfortunately, circumstances forced them to stay with Mark's parents until they could afford their own apartment. Clara and Mark temporarily moved in with Mark's parents after their wedding due to financial constraints and practicality. Despite the difficulties, they remained optimistic. Despite Maria's spacious mansion, the newlyweds had plenty of room to spread out. A bad business venture left Mark struggling, and he needed his mother's help to recover. It was always clear to Clara that Maria was watching and judging her. In response to Mark's parents' refusal to let them stay with them, the couple moved in with them. Clara was, nevertheless, a good daughter-in-law. As Mark knew, living with his controlling mother would be challenging. Maria's icy demeanor made Clara apprehensive about the arrangement. In the hope that things would improve with time, she put on a brave face for Mark. It wasn't clear to the young woman how bad things would get, despite her innocence. In spite of their love for one another, Clara felt a chill emanating from Maria's direction. Her actions around the house were wrong in every way. Mark's family had been skeptical of their relationship from the beginning, but she never anticipated it would become so heated. She was assured by Mark that they would win his family over with time, especially his mother, who had never been easy to please. Clara wasn't convinced. For a while, Mark tried to get away to see if things would change. Despite a 5-day vacation, it was still hard to forget the stress of home. It had been a blissful honeymoon for Clara and Mark in the Bahamas, where the days were filled with sunshine and the nights with whispers of sweet promises. They were suddenly faced with the reality of living in an old, cramped house owned by Mark's parents. It was Maria's turn to insult Clara again, as she had never liked her. As soon as they arrived, Maria's gaze was fixed on Clara. "That's quite a sunburn you've got there, Clara," she sneered. There was no place Maria was not watching, whether it was in the kitchen, the living room, or even in the backyard. Clara's concerns were brushed off by Mark, who was ever the optimist. One evening, as they lay in bed, he told her she'll warm up to you. She just needs time. Maria's eyes were always on Clara from the moment she walked into the house. Mother-in-law's scrutiny wasn't just the usual scrutiny, it was almost eerie in its intensity. Maria stared at Clara and Mark with an incomprehensible expression during dinner. Clara wasn't sure. She felt her skin crawl when she stared at Maria's stare, which was almost predatory. There followed a series of strange events. Upon waking up one morning, Clara noticed something wasn't right. Her eyes scanned the familiar surroundings until they settled on the bed as she looked around the bedroom. Her cotton bedspread was rubbed with her hand. The sheets. They were different. There was no doubt in her mind. She shook Mark gently, whispering, "Wake up, Mark." He sighed and rubbed his eyes. "What are you talking about, Clara?" Clara was stunned. "The sheets," she insisted. "They're not the ones we went to sleep on." Mark sat up and looked around. "They look the same to me, no. They're definitely different," Clara said, a chill running down her spine. "I know they are. Maybe you're just imagining things," Mark suggested, yawning. "It's probably nothing." The event wasn't insignificant, though. The same thing happened over and over again over the next few days. Clara would wake up every morning to find different sheets on the bed. Despite her repeated mentions to Mark, he always dismissed her concerns. Another morning, Clara awoke with a strange sense of unease. She glanced around the room and felt an odd familiarity about the bed. The sheets, she could swear, were different. They were not the ones she and Mark had used the night before. When she mentioned this to Mark, he shrugged it off, too tired to notice the details she was concerned with. She was starting to feel that she was just imagining things in her sleep. As days turned into weeks, Clara's unease grew. The strange occurrences with the bed linens continued, happening sporadically but frequently enough to unsettle her. She thought that someone was actually changing the sheets while they slept, but that was too outrageous to be true. Each time she brought it up to Mark, he dismissed her worries, thinking it was just the stress of their new living situation. Was she just being paranoid? At first, Clara brushed off the feeling as mere paranoia, but it persisted. Every morning, she would wake up with a sense of unease, feeling watched even in the sanctity of their bedroom. Every morning, she noticed something unusual. The sheets on their bed seemed different. They were different from the ones she fell asleep in. They were a shade darker, the fabric smoother. She mentioned it to Mark, but he shrugged it off, too groggy to pay much attention. One night, unable to sleep, Clara lay awake, listening to the house creak and settle around her. If someone was coming into their bedroom at night, she was going to catch them tonight. She lay in bed, pretending to be asleep. Mark was fast asleep beside her, his breathing deep and even. She stared up at the ceiling, her mind racing. But she had no idea who was going to enter her bedroom that night. Suddenly she heard a faint rustling noise coming from outside their bedroom door. All the house helpers were already sent to their rooms for the night. She sat up, her heart pounding in her chest. The door creaked open slowly, and Clara held her breath, straining to see through the darkness. Her throat went dry. This was the moment when she would catch the person who was spying on them. But she had no idea if they were armed or dangerous. A shadow moved into the room, and Clara's blood ran cold. She could see that it was a real live person. For some reason she wished it were a ghost. She yelled out, but the figure quickly ran behind the curtains. Clara sat up straight in her bed. She was still too scared to move. Her eyes stared at the shadow behind the curtain. The stranger was in their room. It was Maria. She was standing in the doorway, watching them. Clara's breath caught in her throat, and she fought the urge to scream. Clara shuffled to get out of her bed. "What are you doing?" Clara managed to whisper, her voice trembling. Maria didn't respond. She just stood there, her eyes fixed on Clara. After what felt like an eternity, Maria turned and silently left the room, closing the door behind her. The next morning, Clara confronted Maria in the kitchen. "Why were you in our room last night?" she demanded. Maria looked up from her coffee, her expression blank. "I don't know what you're talking about." She continued eating her breakfast. "Yes, you do," Clara insisted. "I saw you. You must have been dreaming," Maria said dismissively. "I never went into your room." Clara felt like she was losing her mind. Was she seeing things? One particularly stormy night, their argument reached a fever pitch. "If you're cheating on me, just say so," Mark Clara accused him. Harsh words were exchanged, and both accused each other of infidelity. Mark went downstairs to drown his sorrows. He felt belittled. They went to bed in silence, each feeling deeply hurt and betrayed. Clara lay awake, her mind racing with doubts and fears. Something wasn't right. Days turned into weeks, and the peculiar incidents continued. Clara would meticulously make the bed every morning, only to find the sheets changed by evening. Mark, preoccupied with work, remained oblivious, dismissing Clara's concerns as simple mistakes. Clara's job as a manicurist didn't pay her well. She depended on Mark for everything. Their conversations began to sour, suspicion creeping into their hearts. But Clara still had no proof about who was playing tricks on them. One evening, after another inexplicable change in the sheets, Clara and Mark had a heated argument. Both were exhausted, the stress of their living situation taking a toll. Each suspected the other of deceit, their trust eroding with every passing day. Mark even started sleeping in the guest bedroom. The love that once seemed unbreakable was now being tested by unseen forces. Clara was determined to save her marriage and had a plan up her sleeve. But would her plan even work? Everything was so tense. Clara knew she had to take matters into her own hands. She could not afford to lose Mark over something she felt certain was happening. Her first step was to install a hidden camera in their bedroom. She did it carefully, ensuring it was well concealed and would capture any activity during the night. Clara felt a mix of hope and anxiety as she set up the camera, hoping to finally catch whoever was messing with their lives. That night, Clara lay in bed, feigning sleep once again. She listened to the sounds of the house, every creak and groan making her heart race. She knew that the camera would be recording, and she tried to remain calm, focusing on her breathing. Mark was in the guest room, having given up on their nightly arguments. Clara felt a pang of sadness at how far apart they had grown, but steeled herself with the thought that this plan might bring them closer once the mystery was solved. The next morning, Clara woke up early and eagerly checked the hidden camera footage. Her heart sank when she saw that the camera had malfunctioned, recording nothing but static. She tried to troubleshoot the issue, hoping it was just a temporary glitch, but the camera seemed to have failed completely. Clara felt a wave of frustration wash over her. All her hopes of catching Maria in the act had been dashed. Clara's anger grew as she thought about the night before. She had been so sure this plan would work, and now she was back to square one, with no proof and no idea how to proceed. She felt trapped, isolated in a house where she was constantly being undermined. Her frustration boiled over, and she found herself pacing the bedroom, muttering to herself, "Why is this happening? Why can't I just prove it? She felt a mix of anger and helplessness, knowing she had no evidence to confront Maria with. Determined not to give up, Clara decided she needed a new plan. She couldn't rely on technology alone. She needed to catch Maria in the act with her own eyes. But how? She needed proof to finally show Mark that she was not making it up. She then stayed awake, lying still and listening intently. Clara's mind was racing, but she knew she had to be vigilant. This time she wouldn't let Maria slip through her fingers. The stakes were too high, her marriage depended on it. The next morning, Clara walked into the bedroom to find the sheets different again. This time they were a deep burgundy, a stark contrast to the light blue ones they had bought together. "Mark, this is not normal," she said, her voice trembling. "Someone's messing with us," she begged him to do something. Mark sighed. "Clara, you're being paranoid." "My mom's just..." Quirky. Clara's frustration grew. "Mark, this isn't quirky. This is something else." Clara called her husband out. "Why are you changing our sheets in the middle of the day, Mark?" The tension between them escalated. They started accusing each other of infidelity. "Who is it, Mark? Who's the other woman?" Clara would shout. "I should be asking you that," Mark would retort, anger flashing in his eyes. Their love, which had seemed unbreakable, was now fraying at the edges. They had finally turned on each other. One evening, Clara's suspicion reached its peak when Mark came home late. His shirt was slightly rumpled, and he looked distracted. "Where were you?" Clara demanded, her voice sharp with accusation. Mark sighed. "I told you I had a late meeting." Clara wasn't convinced. "Let me see your phone." Mark recoiled. "What? Why?" "Don't you trust me?" His defensiveness only fueled her suspicions. "Just give it to me, Mark," she insisted, her eyes narrowing. Mark reluctantly handed over his phone. Clara's fingers trembled as she scrolled through his messages and call logs. Everything seemed normal at first, but then she saw a text from an unknown number. "Can't wait to see you again." "Who is this?" Clara demanded, her voice shaking with fury. Mark looked genuinely confused. "I have no idea," he said. "It's probably just spam." Clara didn't believe him. "Do you think I'm stupid, Mark?" she yelled. "Are you cheating on me?" Mark snatched his phone back, anger flashing in his eyes. "No, Clara. I'm not cheating. Why can't you just trust me?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Because everything is falling apart, Mark. The sheets, your mother, now this text. I don't know what to believe anymore." The argument escalated, with both of them shouting over each other. Accusations flew, each word a dagger aimed to wound. Mark stormed out, slamming the door behind him, leaving Clara in tears. Clara felt utterly alone. She sat on the edge of their bed, staring at the unfamiliar sheets, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was happening, something that threatened to destroy her marriage. Desperate for answers, she decided to confront Maria directly. "Maria," she said, entering the kitchen where Maria was calmly sipping her morning coffee. "We need to talk." Maria looked up, her expression unreadable. "About what, dear?" Clara took a deep breath. "About the sheets. And why are you trying to ruin my marriage?" Maria's eyes narrowed slightly, but she maintained her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about, Clara." Clara's frustration boiled over. "Stop lying, Maria. I know you've been in our room. I saw you." Maria set her coffee cup down gently. "You must be mistaken. I've never set foot in your room." Clara's heart pounded in her chest. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. "Why can't you just let us be happy?" Maria's face hardened. Clara knew that she was hiding something. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. She realized then that she was facing a formidable enemy, one who would stop at nothing to tear her and Mark apart. The next day, Clara decided to do some snooping while her mother-in-law was out. While cleaning the attic, Clara stumbled upon an old, dusty photo album. Flipping through its yellowed pages, she found a photograph that made her heart skip a beat. She recognized her face immediately. Although it was 30 years ago, she knew that sly smile. It was a picture of Maria in her youth, standing beside a man who looked strikingly like Mark. Was that Mark's father? In the midst of their turmoil, Clara stumbled upon the old photograph while cleaning the attic. There were a few others with the same man. Maria was beautiful in her younger days, stunning and vibrant, with a look of fierce determination in her eyes. The realization hit Clara like a thunderbolt. Maria's jealousy was not just about her relationship with Mark, but also about the life she once had and lost. Was this the clue she needed? As Clara stared at the photo, something clicked in her mind. She had her suspicions, but now she had proof. She wondered if her husband Mark knew. The jealousy, the strange occurrences, the unending scrutiny, it all made sense now. She wanted to share her findings with Mark. Maria's behavior wasn't just about disapproval, it was rooted in something deeper, something almost pathological. The man she was married to wasn't Mark's biological father. Clara stared at the old photograph. Could it be that the famous Maria, the young and beautiful heiress, was a fake? The new bride found more recent photos of her current husband. Clara was certain that she was standing next to a man who was not Mark's father. She compared the two photos. The man she was married to now was not Mark's biological father. A surge of curiosity overwhelmed Clara, and she tucked the photo into her pocket. Clara wasn't sure what to do with the newfound information. She felt a mix of confusion and apprehension as she tucked the photograph into her pocket. Should she tell Mark about it? How would he react? Clara knew the implications could be huge. This secret had the potential to destroy Mark's image of his mother and his family. But keeping it to herself felt like a betrayal. She sat in the attic, wrestling with her thoughts. Over the next few days, Clara found herself constantly on edge, the photograph burning a hole in her pocket. She couldn't stop thinking about it. Every interaction with Maria was now tinged with a deeper understanding and a darker shade of suspicion. Clara knew she had to be cautious. Maria's motives were clearly not as simple as they seemed. Clara needed more information before making a move. She decided to look for more clues. Clara began searching the house for any other hidden secrets. She explored every nook and cranny while Mark was at work and Maria was out. One afternoon, she found an old, locked chest in the basement. Using a hairpin, she managed to pry it open. Inside, she discovered more old photographs, letters, and documents. As she sifted through them, Clara uncovered details of Maria's past relationships and business dealings. It was clear Maria had a history of manipulating those around her. Clara felt the weight of the secrets pressing down on her like a suffocating blanket. The knowledge of Maria's past and the realization that she might be concealing even more left Clara feeling trapped and alone. Every glance from Maria now seemed more sinister, every word more loaded. Clara's nerves were constantly on edge, making it hard for her to concentrate on anything else. She found herself avoiding Maria, unable to act normal around her mother-in-law, and the strain of keeping these secrets began to take a toll on her. The stress gnawed at Clara, making her feel isolated in a house that wasn't her own, surrounded by people she could no longer trust. She didn't know how to proceed. Confronting Maria could lead to an explosive confrontation, and telling Mark could shatter his world. The pressure was immense, and she felt like she was walking on a tightrope. Clara began to dread each interaction with Maria, fearing that her mother-in-law might sense her newfound knowledge. She knew she needed to talk to someone, but how would he react? She couldn't keep this to herself any longer. Clara was stressed, but she had to tell Mark the truth. That night, Clara showed the photograph to Mark. "Look at this," she said. "Who is this man?" Mark's eyes widened. "I don't know. I've never seen him before." He squinted his eyes at the photograph. Clara frowned. "There's something about this. I don't know what, but I feel like it's connected." Mark looked at her, his eyes wide in shock as he realized what his wife discovered. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Clara started paying closer attention. But Maria was always one step ahead of her. Clara tried to spy on her during the day. She installed a hidden camera in their bedroom, hoping to catch whatever was happening. Maria knew that something was up, and the bed sheets remained the same for a few nights in a row. Days passed, and then one evening she reviewed the footage.